lot of action on Capitol Hill yesterday, more today. And for that, we're going to turn to Armen Kurdian, retired U.S. Navy captain and political strategist. Good afternoon. Thanks so much for joining the Live Zone today.
Good morning. Always happy to be here.
All right, we're going to start off with the D.C. crime bills. We're going to start off close to home. We were watching this yesterday. House Republicans passed two bills that are among more than a dozen crime-centered laws being considered by Republicans in the aftermath of President Trump's federal takeover of the D.C. police force. The House approved a measure dubbed the D.C. Crimes Act, which limits the city's ability to make changes to its criminal sentencing laws. The bill also lowers the age minors can be tried as adults in the district. Now, critics argue the bills could backfire, though, leading to repeat criminals and worse long-term outcomes for the city's youth. So, Armen, we'll start off by asking what comes next, and do you think these bills will make it all the way to the president's desk?
I think they're definitely going to make it to the president's desk. The idea that they're going to cause some kind of issues with repeat criminals that's happening right now. So how it could be any worse, I'm not exactly sure. The proof is in the pudding with what Trump has done in the D.C. district. And in a lot of ways, it's interesting that you have the district basically as a crucible to test some of these tougher crime laws and tougher prosecutions of crime that are basically making the citizens of the district a lot safer. And he's going to take that blueprint, he's going to take it out into the rest of the country. A lot of the rest of these bills are going to continue to make it more difficult for lenient judges to basically not prosecute crime or provide more lax sentences, or eliminate things like no cash bail. So I think this is a really good first step. Even Mayor Bowser has said that this has been a very positive step for her city. So I don't know how folks can really argue against it.
What does it mean for home rule, though? And do you imagine that the D.C. Council or the mayor will sort of take action to try to prevent these bills from getting passed any further, making it to the Senate, making it to the president's desk?
It's always possible. I wouldn't put it past the council, but home rule is part of the district's existence as a special entity within the United States. But at the same time, if you fail to lead your city, then the federal government has the right to come in. There are those mechanisms in place. Look at the city of Detroit that went bankrupt, had major serious crime problems, went from a population of 1.5 million down to half of that because of crime issues and other things. So at some point you've got to come in. You got to say you've failed your city, you failed the district, you failed the national capital of the most powerful nation in the world, and we need to do something to actually go in and fix it and improve it. You talk to the folks on the streets. You're hearing a lot of positives about how much safer it is in the district. The only people who seem to be complaining are elected folks who happen to be Democrats.
Well, speaking of the Democrats, they have been kind of put in a tough place because any vote against these rules kind of makes it look like they are against making the city safer or for crime. They're voting for crime, as the president has put it. So what do you see being the next course of action for critics of these bills or for proponents of home rule who
have put themselves into a hole because of their hatred for Donald Trump? They basically oppose anything that he does. And in doing so, they put themselves on the wrong side of many 70-30, even 80-20 issues. So they would have been much better suited, and it's not too late, to say, well, maybe that idea is not so good, but maybe we can do this to actually improve crime. Maybe we can, at the same time we're doing some of these things, we can increase youth programs and after-school programs, other kinds of mentorship programs that are preventative measures to prevent kids from committing crime in the first place. I think that would be a good thing because it has to be a very holistic effort to reduce crime. It's very important to enforce enforce the laws that are out there and prosecute criminals. But if you can prevent people from becoming criminals in the first place, you can do that. I think that's an opportunity that Democrats have missed, and Republicans in some parts of the country are actually taking advantage of that and putting those kinds of things in place.
Let's look ahead to tomorrow because the mayor, the council chair, and the attorney general are all due on the Hill. They're set to testify in front of the GOP oversight committee. What do you expect from that hearing?
Well, I expect some fireworks, as always. I expect a lot of partisan politics in a lot of these hearings. It's really unfortunate. A lot of these televised hearings have just become that. They've been televised for show. And I would say, of all the time that's spent in these things, only 15 to 20% you get some kind of substantive action. And I think that's unfortunate, but that's simply how it actually goes. Is something going to come out of there that's going to be uh, new, that's going to move the ball forward? I really don't think so. These things are basically set up for either the folks who are up there on the dais or the folks who are actually answering questions to get some TV hits and get some talking points and clips and sound bites for their own social media. Rarely does anything ever come out of these that is of any substance. Maybe that's something that we could be looking towards in the future, but I don't expect any major earth-shattering news tomorrow.
All right. Well, I know there have been a lot of accusations that D.C. police officials or city leaders have manipulated those crime stats. That was sort of the basis for the president declaring this crime emergency. Maybe we'll get some details on that tomorrow. Maybe we won't. We'll be covering it right here on Fox 5. And we want to take you back to the House floor minutes ago, which was debating the D.C. Policing Protection Act. This is a bill that would permit D.C. police to engage in vehicular pursuits. Take a listen.
Which was the guy who had committed an armed robbery at a local hardware store, had pistol whipped the manager of that store, made it to his car, fired at officers, and began. Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the time and the indulgence to the chairman and the speaker. I just urge strong support of H.R. 5143. It restores legitimate discretion to the police officers that actually work the streets of D.C. I yield the balance of my time. I thank you all.
Gentleman yields. Gentleman from California is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Obviously, I just want to thank the gentleman from Louisiana also for his service in law enforcement. And I know that he is trying to help in trying to move public safety forward. I know that's his intention, but I just want to clarify a few things. It's been mentioned that this committee somehow, or that this bill somehow has been heard by a committee. We have not held a hearing on these bills to clarify. Our hearing on D.C. is actually tomorrow. There's been no coordination with the mayor or the city council. They oppose this bill. And I do want to clarify, it's been mentioned a few times when we've debated this bill, that there's somehow 14 criteria that officers have to consider before engaging in a pursuit. The law is very clear. The suspect must have committed or attempted a crime of violence or pose an imminent threat of death or seriously bodily harm. The pursuit is necessary to protect another person from serious bodily injury or not likely to cause injury to others, and all other options have been exhausted or do not reasonably lend themselves to the circumstances, is actually what the actual law says. So I just want to note that. I'm not sure what those 14 criteria are, and I want to yield, of course, 7 minutes to the gentlewoman from the District of Columbia, Representative Norton.
Gentlewoman is recognized.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. I strongly oppose this undemocratic and paternalistic bill, which amends D.C. law. The over 700,000 D.C. residents, the majority of whom are black and brown, are capable and worthy of governing themselves. I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record letters opposing this bill from D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser, the entire D.C. Council, and D.C. Attorney General Brian Schwab.
Without objection.
D.C.'s local legislature, the council, has 13 members. If D.C. residents do not like how members vote, residents can vote them out of office or pass a ballot measure. That is called democracy. Congress has 535 voting members. None are elected by D.C. residents. If D.C. residents do not like how members vote on local D.C. matters, residents cannot vote them out of office or pass a ballot measure. This is the antithesis of democracy. The substance of this bill is irrelevant since there is never justification for Congress to legislate on local D.C. matters. Nevertheless, I will discuss it. Vehicular pursuits by police officers are inherently dangerous, not just for officers and suspects, but for bystanders too. And often there are other options to detain a suspect. DC permits vehicular pursuits, but it imposes limitations on them. According to the International Association of Chiefs of Police, vehicular pursuit policies must balance the risks, take all of the factors into consideration, and reach a decision that is best suited to their jurisdictions. Unlike DC, 2% of local police departments prohibit vehicular pursuits altogether. The sponsor of this bill, who is from Louisiana, thinks he knows better than DC how to strike the proper balance in DC. I will read for my Republican colleagues part of the signing statement your fellow Republican, President Richard Nixon, issued on the DC Home Rule Act. One of the major goals of this administration is to place responsibility for local functions under local control and to provide local governments with the authority and resources they need to serve their communities effectively. The measure I signed today represents a significant step in achieving this goal in the city of Washington. I will give the people of the District of Columbia the right to elect their own local officials and to govern themselves in local affairs. As the nation approaches the 200th anniversary of its founding, it is particularly appropriate to assure those persons who live in our capital city rights and privileges which have long been enjoyed by most of their countrymen. DC residents have all the obligations of American citizenship, including paying federal taxes, serving on juries, and registering with the Selective Service. Yet Congress denies them full local government and voting representation in Congress. The only solution to this undemocratic treatment is to grant DC statehood. I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a letter explaining why DC statehood is constitutional from leading constitutional scholars, including Larry Tribe.
Without objection.
DC statehood, the DC statehood bill, H.R. 51, the Washington, D.C. Admission Act, grants D.C. residents full local self-government and voting representation in Congress. H.R. 51 reduces the size of the federal district from 68 square miles to 2 square miles, consisting of the White House, the Capitol, the Supreme Court, the National Mall, and remaining under the control of Congress. The new state consists of the residential and commercial areas of D.C. The new state has a larger population than 2 states, pays more federal taxes per capita than any state, and pays more local federal taxes than 21 states. I urge members to vote no on the D.C. Policing Protection Act. Keep their hands off D.C. and free D.C., and I yield back.
Gentlewoman yields. Gentleman from California reserves. Gentleman from Kentucky is recognized. Gentleman from Kentucky.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent to enter a letter from Representative Min into the record, which clarifies that he meant to vote yes on H.R. 5143 in committee.
The gentleman's request will be covered by general leave. Gentleman is recognized.
I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from California is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from New Jersey, Representative McIver.
Thank you.
Gentlewoman is recognized.
Thank you to the ranking member. Mr. Speaker, I rise today with deep concern for our nation's capital, also known as Chocolate City. The 4 Republican bills on the floor this week are a direct attack on the people of this city, particularly the Black and brown communities who have called D.C. home for generations. Residents who have built thriving small businesses, who have received an education from DC school system, and residents who have raised families and called themselves proud Washingtonians since birth. This bill, H.R. 5143, would impose the president's twisted vision of justice on D.C., overriding the autonomy of this city and hurting the people who live here, enabling deadly vehicle pursuits of suspects in the city. As a former councilwoman and a council president of the largest city in New Jersey, I know firsthand that this is dangerous. And that's on top of the other bills that we're debating this week that seek to strip D.C. of its autonomy, force more juveniles into the justice system, expand the president's gross overreach, and make things worse. The bills proposed by my Republican colleagues would worsen the already rampant injustices we see in the criminal justice system, make law enforcement more dangerous, and steal the futures of many of our youth. These bills all send the same statement to Washingtonians. The administration does not believe you have the same right to dignity as other parts of this nation. If Congress truly wants to make our nation's capital as safe as it can be, we would listen to the residents of D.C. and their elected leaders who have lived experience of what this community needs. The dog whistles used to justify these bills are not true. The D.C. government has long taken a proactive approach to reducing crime in the district, and today is experiencing a 3-decade low in crime. D.C. has done this in part by having a police force that looks like the very people it is sworn to protect, lives in the community it serves, and caters to the unique needs of D.C. residents. H.R. 5143 discourages basic public safety.
I'd like to give the gentlewoman an extra minute, please.
Without objection.
Discourages public safety, pushes lies about crime in the Black and brown communities, and puts everyone in harm's way at risk. That is why it is no surprise of who the sponsor is of this very dangerous and wicked bill. This bill is dangerous once again and a complete disaster to this community. I urge my colleagues to vote no, and with that, I yield back.
Gentlewoman yields. Gentleman from California reserves. Gentleman from Kentucky is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 3 additional minutes to the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Higgins.
Gentleman yields, or gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman. Let me just diplomatically address a couple of the accusations here regarding the nature of my bill. The gentlelady acknowledged that there's danger involved. Yes, yes, ma'am. Enforcing the law is dangerous. This is why your professional law enforcement officers across the country, including here in D.C., are incredibly well vetted and trained and equipped to make decisions in a matter of seconds or less to pursue criminals and to enforce the law. It's dangerous work. It's dangerous for the officer. It can result in injury or death for the criminal. It can result in injury or death for innocent Americans. But let us never forget that the interaction was initiated by the criminal. So, yes, enforcing the law is dangerous work. What's more dangerous, Mr. Speaker, is failure to enforce the law. What's more dangerous for every community, including our nation's capital, for which this body has a responsibility to stand. What's more dangerous for every community is failure to give discretion for enforcement of law to the very law enforcement professionals that you have trained and equipped and placed on the street. To not allow those professionals to make decisions and enforce the law, that is incredibly dangerous. So my bill stands on the side of the citizenry of D.C. in the effort to enforce the law by fully empowering the police officers of D.C. to engage criminal conduct and enforce the law. Mr. Speaker, I yield.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Kentucky reserves. The gentleman from California is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to yield 5 minutes to the gentleman from Maryland, Representative Ivey.
The gentleman from Maryland is recognized for 5 minutes.
I thank my colleague for yielding, and Mr. Speaker, I want to state that I rise in strong opposition to the gentleman's bill. I appreciate my colleague from Louisiana. We've had a chance to serve together on committees, and I know he has a strong respect for law enforcement. So I'm not saying his heart's in the wrong place, but I am saying this bill is wrong. And I say that from personal experience. You're right, I was never in an active car pursuit, but I was a prosecutor here in Washington, D.C., and for 8 years in Prince George's County, which is the eastern border of Washington, D.C. So I've seen the results of some of these high-speed chases. Now, the bill that's drafted, that he's proposed, actually takes away a reasonable balance that was drawn by the people here of the District of Columbia, as is their right for a democracy. And also, one of the things we need to keep in mind, and my colleague addressed this kind of briefly, but frankly skipped over it, what happens when that chase leads to the death of innocent civilians? When you said you'd been in 100 car chases, a chill went through my body, I gotta say, because I've seen the results, the deadly consequences of some of these car chases. And when you have to go talk to that family and tell them why their loved ones died, you don't want to have to say that it was over something minor like a stolen car. So the balance that the city struck was that it should be for an imminent violent offense, high-level felony, something like that, that really you understand why they would have engaged in the pursuit. But this bill would take that away and expand it open so that you could have high-speed chases taking place with respect to misdemeanors. And this isn't a hypothetical for me. When I was the state's attorney in Prince George's County, we actually had one of these. We had several, but I'll just pick one for purposes of time. Police officer saw a stolen motorcycle zip down the Beltway and decided to pursue it. Now, stealing a motorcycle is a misdemeanor. Speeding is a misdemeanor, but he decided to pursue it anyway. Now, mind you, this is during rush hour. So he had to pursue on the border of the road, and speeds got up to over 100 miles an hour on the Beltway in rush hour. And of course, it's hard for a car to catch a motorcycle, especially when it can weave in and out of traffic. So he didn't make the apprehension. But what he did do, as he was speeding along on the side of the road at 100 miles an hour plus, was come across debris on the car, or on the road, and he tried to swerve to avoid it. And when he did that, the car jumped over the Jersey barrier between the two lanes and took him into the opposite lane of oncoming traffic. The car jumped over, hit the top of a car coming in the opposite direction, and killed 2 men on their way to a concert. They had nothing to do with any kind of high-speed chase. They didn't have anything to do with any kind of criminal activity. These were people who were good folks, actually just visiting in the area. One was from Buffalo, who died because of a high-speed chase over a minor misdemeanor. That doesn't make any sense. And it's not like that only happens in Prince George's County. Here in Washington, D.C., we had a similar kind of case. It was back in 2016. It led to a deadly chase on East Capitol and Benning Road. Now, the chases you were talking about, maybe those are rural areas, but those are high-traffic areas, even in the nighttime. And sometimes these pursuits take place during the day. This led to a death of an innocent man. This was over a stolen car. Think about what you would say to that family when you're explaining to them that your father, your brother, your son lost his life over a stolen car. And then the other part that influences me, again, I represent Prince George's County now, but sometimes when they start high-speed chases in D.C., They go into Prince George's County, into Montgomery County, into Northern Virginia. And we lost someone during a high-speed chase on the Baltimore-Washington Parkway. Another stolen car case. So when we make these decisions about when a chase is permitted or should be permitted or not, we need to keep in mind that there can be deadly consequences from when this happens, and it frequently occurs. And it's not like this is unusual. The Washington Post just did a piece about the park police, 10 of these instances in recent weeks. Couple last points. One is liability. The federal government's going to put this burden on the city, but when that liability happens from the
Gentleman's
death,
time has expired.
Want to yield another 2 minutes, please?
Gentleman's recognized for another 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When that liability arises from a car chase that didn't make any sense to a jury, the city can be on the hook for millions of dollars.
All right, that is from the House floor, the D.C. Policing Protection Act currently being debated. This was a few moments ago, actually. This bill would permit D.C. police to engage in vehicular pursuits. We heard some arguments for and against it. The arguments against it coming from D.C. Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton, who has spoke out against all of these measures that attack D.C. home rule. You also were just hearing from Maryland Representative Glenn Ivey sharing some of his experience prosecuting cases that arose from vehicular pursuits that ended in deaths.